You want to be humble, read a definition in an 1828 Webster's Dictionary. In 1828, that's after the Revolutionary War, of course before the Civil War. It wasn't all that long ago. You just get very humbled when you realize how smart a lot of people were. Maybe not complicated smart, but just all around intelligent and well-spoken back then. And I suppose we think we're smarter nowadays with a basic understanding of calculus and trigonometry or whatever by the time you get out of high school. But, you had 18 and 20-year-olds writing the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution back then. And now I don't know if most 18 and 20-year-olds can read it and comprehend it, let alone to invent it and write it. But even today, I just want to ask the question, what is modesty? And I like the 1828 dictionary definition. It is, and I quote here from that dictionary, that lowly temper which accompanies a moderate estimate of one's own worth and importance. This temper, when natural, springs in some measure from timidity, and in young and inexperienced persons is allied to bashfulness and diffidence. In persons who have seen the world and lost their natural timidity, modesty springs no less from principle than from feeling, and is manifested by retiring, unobtrusive manners, assuming less to itself than others are willing to yield, and conceding to others all due honor and respect, or even more than they expect or require. In the definition. So I think that's pretty impressive. It's amazing how far away from 1828 in our sense of intelligent vocabulary that we are today, but there's a lot there and it's a good definition. The Greek word is for modesty is aldos, and it's actually only used once in the New Testament here. And maybe we can look at that. First Timothy chapter 2, verse 9, it says, in like manner also, that women adorn themselves in modest apparel with shamefastness and sobriety, not with broided hair or gold or pearls or costly array, but which becomes women professing godliness with good works. Be modest, don't fancy yourself up, but just do good works. Modesty is an interesting concept. Like I said, the Greek word aldos, it means, as I understand it, it means at the very least to give a proper respect to. Quite possibly it even means to give more respect to, such as a thing or a person. Give more respect to than that person or thing deserves. Today, I think if you would go into an American Christian church here, Christian church here in America, and ask them about modesty, I have thought, what answers would you get? And I think there's probably about 3 different answers you would receive if you ask them what is modesty. I think one, you get a generic, that is humility. You would not get this 200-word definition from Webster's Dictionary in 1828 explaining what modesty is. I think they would say modesty, that's humility. That would be one answer I believe you would get. And by that they would mean that modesty and humility are just synonyms, one and the same. And I would say that they are about as much wrong as they are right with that answer. The second answer that you might get from people would be, they would say, modesty, that means women not wearing low-cut shirts or miniskirts. And again, my simple commentary on that, they are about as wrong as they are right in that concept, or that answer. The third reaction you might get if you ask that in a church they'd simply roll their eyes and something like, no. Not another fuddy-duddy telling me how to dress, or not to dress skimpy, or that my dress is too tight. Meaning that they really truly believe, answer number 2, that modesty means women's not dressing like yesteryear's prostitutes. And while they believe modesty is not dressing inappropriate, they don't like being told not to dress slutty, simply put. And honestly, have you ever noticed that? You know, we got people that they want to set the fashion standards for today, but I would contend that the real fashion setters are the prostitutes from 50 years ago. They're just like 30 or 50 years ahead of their time. Go back 50 years ago, and you look at some of the hookers on what they're wearing, and you come back to today, and that's what you will find them wearing in high school anymore. College towns. I kid you not. Some of the prostitutes 80 years ago are dressed more conservatively than the juniors in high school. When I was a kid, I'd see the streetwalkers on that show Cops, you know, bad boys, what you gonna do, you know? And they'd show, and it was appalling, they'd show the streetwalkers out there, and they knew they were streetwalkers by how they were dressed. And I think, you take that footage today and you show that, and you don't know if they're working the corner or they're going to algebra class at the local high school. And I'm not kidding. You know that show Gunsmoke? You realize Miss Kitty was a prostitute? I mean, did you know that? They cleaned her up after about third season, where she was no longer the head prostitute. She was a saloon owner at that point. Of course, Gunsmoke was a radio show. I'm sure you knew that Gunsmoke was a radio show. And that entire time, she was the saloon girl. The first two seasons, she was a saloon girl, but we had to clean that up. And I just think, you got Miss Kitty here, a natural 1950 prostitute. She showed up at a high school homecoming. She'd blush because the dresses are so, they make her working girls look like nuns in comparison. So what is modesty? I have given you what I would think would be the three most common responses. That'd catch most people if you just asked it. Of Christians in American churches today, that's the three that I could come up with that I think they would most likely to give. Oh, that's humility. Oh, that's women dressing inappropriate. Or, oh, don't tell me to dress, you old prude. Don't tell me how to dress, you boomer. I taught my parents what the term boomer means yesterday. Does anybody know what the term boomer means? Okay, the young people do. It's a new way of calling somebody a fuddy-dud. So if you're an old person in here and somebody says boomer, they're calling you a fuddy-dud because you are the baby boomer generation. So if a young person looks at you and says, okay, boomer, they mean, okay, you stupid fuddy-dud. You know, you prude, you stick in the mud. So if a young person says, oh, whatever, boomer, you know, they're calling you a baby boomer. They're saying you're old and out of touch and out of date. You know, so that's the way I think you'd get talked to. What's modesty? Oh no, here's a boomer telling me that's how they would think. And you know how I said earlier that they don't like to be told not to dress. You know, they may say sexy, I may say slutty, but why is that? Well, for one, they want the world to love them. There is an immense problem with people not wanting to be set apart. They just can't find it in them not to look and act and walk and talk and dress like the world. We have a tremendous problem, even within the Christian church. We are a lukewarm church, and so many Christians, they insist on looking and walking and acting and talking like the world. And if that means short shorts or low-cut tops, and that's what they'll do. And they don't want to be told that it's not correct. They just don't want to hear it. It's not that they don't agree. They might agree. They just don't want to hear it. And it's not that they want to even actually have a logical discussion about it. They just don't want to hear it. Because they refuse to put themselves outside the realm of what's socially acceptable, the world. They want to be part of it. And I know I'm talking to some older folks that maybe this is beyond you now, and you're not running in the peer pressure circles. Maybe you are. Maybe you need to know this for what you might teach somebody someday. I don't know, but really you have a lot of people, it comes down to a heart of, they don't want to be told they're wrong. You know, we have some feminist type attitudes. No, I am going to be a strong, independent woman and wear whatever I want. Nobody's going to tell me to do different. And I think all three of those answers that I said, they kind of derive from a distant point of truth. Modesty. It seems to me that modesty is conducting yourself in a manner that doesn't bring attention to yourself, but also in a manner that is courteous and respectful to others, even more than they might deserve. So really, I break that down to you. There's two parts. I think there's the two aspects of modesty. First, you're not trying to bring attention to yourself. And that is related to humility. You know, that we can say there's some humility aspects to that. You're not so vain that you have to be around here drawing attention to yourself. So yes, modesty, I think that's one half of the equation. The other half of the equation, I see from what the Greek word means, allos, it means to even forego yourself enough to show somebody else more courtesy and more respect, maybe more than they even deserve. And we saw that in the 1828 definition of modesty. You might not have to show them respect, but you still will. So there is a sense of, you know, I guess to that end, there was a truck. We've been loading trucks, been pretty busy. We had a trucker come in, and he told, I wasn't there. I was off with a doctor's appointment in Iowa City or whatever. But anyways, my 8-year-old son was covering for me and chatting up the trucker. You know, so he was covering the trucker chat. And apparently, you know, I came back and my son said it was the first time he's ever been called sir. You know, that trucker, and the trucker's actually 1 year older than me. And I've been informed he looked younger than me. Thank you, children. He looks younger than me, but he is always 1 year older than me, but he's 41. And he called my son sir. He said, yes, sir. And boy, that made an impression on Lemuel, you know. First time I ever been. It was a respect that he didn't necessarily deserve, you know. The trucker was showing some modesty to the extent that he was thinking of my son more than he was thinking of himself, and showed him a sign of respect, called him sir, you know. He didn't have to give that. That was a modest gesture, you know. Not necessarily humility. I don't think the trucker was so humble that he thought he had to do that for an 8-year-old boy, but you know, he did it as modesty. So there is an aspect of humility to it, but you don't necessarily have to be humble to be modest. But it sure helps. Humble people tend to be modest, but you can just decide to be modest. Decide that the way you're acting is not appropriate, and then just decide to be modest. And the humility might come afterwards. Humility is an answer to pride. But you can't just decide sometimes that I'm going to be humble. Sometimes God has to teach you to be humble. Sometimes you have to be humble, or what we say, humiliated. Sometimes humility is harder to come by. Sometimes modesty is, well, this is just not so good. You know, just thinking off the top of my head here, you might just decide, you know what, instead of taking a fancy Harley to church today, I'll just take the good old family mobile, so I don't, or if I take the Harley, I'm going to kind of park it on the back row, or I take the Corvette, I'm going to park it on the back row, I don't want to park it up there in the handicap spot, or just that sort of thing. I'm going to tend to shy away a little bit here, not to just show it up in everybody's face. But anyways, how does this all come into play into Christian life or church? And what about those stock answers that were given by most Christians? Is modesty just humility? Well, I've spoken to that point. Why do many Christian women roll their eyes and say, don't tell me how to dress? Well, I've spoken to that as well. But I'll also add to that point that a lot of women are unnecessarily offended by the thought of modesty, because deep down they only think that it applies to women. I mean, they are offended because they think it's a principle that only applies to them, and so out of their pride and their arrogance, they will be against it for that sole reason. And it isn't just about women, per se, which brings us to the last stock answer that most Christians would give, or in my estimation, most churchgoers would give. They would say, oh, modesty, that means women not wearing low-cut shirts or miniskirts. Well, there is something to that answer, because in our passage here today, it says, 1 Timothy 2:9, in like manner also that women adorn themselves in modest apparel. So apparently apparel is a big factor in it. What does that mean? It means modest apparel. Apparel that is modest. Apparel that does not attract attention and draw attention to yourself. And it shows respect to those who don't deserve it, which is substantiated by the context of this verse, which is giving examples of immodest apparel. And it's not necessarily that which we would give examples as. We would say low-cut blouses. Well, that's not what Paul was telling Timothy. Here's what he said. He said, in like manner also that women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with shamefastness and sobriety. That means it's a concerted effort. You're making a decision to, in sound mind, not with broided or braided hair, or plaited hair, or gold, or pearls, or costly array. Not jazzing yourself up, trying to draw attention to you. But, which becomes women professing godliness. But, and he says, this is becoming of women who are or want to be godly. What you adorn yourself with is good works. That's godliness, he says. So what does that mean? First off, and I'll just go ahead and make a point and then an application just real quick. I hadn't planned on is, good works. We're going to be godly. Good works. Now, we live in a society that says, well, you can't judge me by my works. Absolutely. Good works lends itself to godliness. If you want to be considered a godly woman, you are going to be judged by your works. Young men, you want a good woman. You don't look for the ones with braided hair or that are gold or pearls or costly array. You look for the ones who are godly, good works. Their works show their faith and their character. So how does that mean today? You know what? We have hairdos. Everybody has to do something to stick out, And we have a whole society that's sticking out, that the only person that stick out are the people that's not doing something to stick out. I go to Iowa City, and I'm the only weird one down there because I'm not weird. I'm not kidding you. I go in there, and I've got a normal haircut. People look at me like, oh, what are you doing? You got these people with one side of their head shaved and the other one's up and over. And they're normal. Because everybody is the goal, really, and is for everybody to be doing something to make themselves unique. And I'm weird and unique because I'm not doing something to be unique. Man, dyeing your hair. And I'm not just saying that you're going from blonde to brunette. I'm saying pink and green and hairdos, nails. Have you seen these nails that people are putting on? And the fads that people are doing. And we might not have the gold and the pearl, but people are finding a way to bring attention to themselves. And they say, oh, this is just expressing me. And deep down, they are bringing attention to themselves. What's a status? I tell you, these people with the sunglasses that are this huge, good night. Just put a welding helmet on next time. And that's the huge. Going around, so how big are your eyeballs, lady? And you need those dinner plates over your face. But that's the fashion trend now. It is. And that's one thing. And what else do we have? The fake eyelashes, you know. And that's what's considered nice. And I look at some of these people and I think, how can you be comfortable looking like you have caterpillars sitting on your eyelid? And that's exactly what it is. And it's a shame, but that's exactly what it is. That's what we have. You know, they might have had gold and pearls. But we got these people that you have to be extreme to draw some attention to yourself. Shaving, you know, it's a thing now. To just shave your eyebrow completely off and then just tattoo it on. You know what? I tell you what, for all you boomers out there, you know what the next thing is? And I'm not kidding you. They file their teeth down until they can, and you go and you grind your teeth down, and then they put a permanent cap on it that's gold, where all your teeth are gold. Ew. It's referred to as a grill, if you do not know. And, it used to be you had like this mouthpiece, a metallic mouthpiece, and you snap it in, and then you went around with your gold grill on, and it was like a retainer, It used to be retainers bad. Now you got your retainer, and it's a grill now. Now they're just doing it permanently. Forever you will have metal smile. And that's the thing. You got to draw attention to yourself. Hairdos, jewelry, Gucci bags. It's how in the world, they had, what was that they had this thing the size of a grain of sand, and they claimed it was a Gucci bag. What did it sell for? Something like $13,000 or $30,000 or something. It's some Gucci bag. Give me a break. From Versace and all these buying names, and that's the way you are status symbol. Draw attention to yourself. Society wants you to draw attention to yourself. I don't rag on tattoos in general. Okay, I know people have tattoos. I will tell you that, especially people who got them in the past. I don't know the mindset of the Vietnam veterans that are coming out with their military tattoos, and the people that have tattoos that mean something to them, and this and that. I'm not ragging on them, but I will tell you, for especially all you boomers, that my generation and down, the point of a tattoo is to show it off and be more flamboyant than somebody else. It is solely anymore to draw attention to oneself. It used to be you'd have these gangbangers with their tattoos that, teardrop means you spent time in jail. And they have some meaning. Now it's just like you get drunk and you go out and it's just an attention-seeking thing. Well, tattoo Garfield across my forehead. And they because that, whatever can get me the most attention, not just the tattoo itself, but the act of getting a tattoo. And that's all it's become. It's just become something to draw attention to yourself. Like the caterpillars on your eyelashes. It's just more and more extravagant. Why? To draw attention to oneself. That's a lot of what the transgender movement is. Draw attention to oneself. You want some attention, just say you're not. If you're a boy, say you're a girl. If you're a girl, say you're a boy. That's a good way to get some attention. And then that's going to fade away. It's only a matter of time. That fades away. It'll be some other sexual perversion. When everybody starts doing it, it starts losing its effect. Got to have attention. Modesty is that you can go through life without having to draw that attention to yourself. And in fact, that you would be willing not to have attention if it meant being courteous to somebody else. Now, what does that mean? It means you would forego looking good if it didn't hurt somebody else's feelings. All those things I'm up here even thinking about how much of some people's lives they spend trying to look good. That's vanity and pride, but also just trying to make sure everybody else sees them looking boob jobs and piercings. Good night. Piercings aren't enough. They put gauges in the ears. You got to have a hole in your ear. You got to be something special so people look at you and say, wow. Not say, wow, that guy's an idiot, but they're going to say, wow. It is. That's, I ain't kidding. As long as they get a reaction. You know? Next thing, you know, after grills and having permanent metal installed into your mouth, you're going to be something else. Why? To get attention. It's solely self-based. It is immodesty. The world gets to act that way. People still get boob jobs, and you know what they're doing now? Butt implants. Yeah, literally butt implants. Not just for up, it's for the lower part too. The world gets to act that way. Christians do not. That's simple. I'm not really offended. I'm appalled, but I'm not offended that the world acts that way. They're worldly. But Christians aren't to act that way. 1 Corinthians 6:19. 1 Corinthians 6:19. And again, I'm not, if you have had your hair dyed, if you have a tattoo, if you have ears pierced, I'm not saying you're an evil person. I'm not at all. I'm saying, boy, if you've got 14 earrings in one ear, and every time people are no longer amazed that you walking into the room, you got to go get another one just so people will look at you again. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking that you need to go and do something drastic. It's just living your life to get to the next high of people looking at you. How many women, I don't even know if there's, even wearing makeup falls in it. There's some women, they refer to painting the barn, and, that's about what it is, painting the barn. They refer to themselves as, I'm not coming to your house until I get the barn painted. And they were talking about putting their makeup on. Now some women, it helps us when they wear makeup. But if you have to wear so much makeup, that's just they're being considerate. But I'm just saying, if you have to wear so much makeup that you aren't recognizable without it, you need to consider some things. I'm not saying I saw, when I was a kid, I was told, and I didn't wear makeup, but I overheard, the point of makeup is to look like you're not wearing makeup. Well, today, the point of makeup is to make sure how complicated you can get on it. So, anyways, and these things where they have the eye mascara rolling out now, and it's always just amazes me what they have to stand out and be different. Why? So that people will look at them and go, oh, that is immodesty. Immodesty goes to both men and women. 1 Corinthians 6:19 through 20. What? Know you not that your body is a temple of the Holy Ghost which is in you, which ye have of God, and you are not your own? For ye are brought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. When you bring glory with your body, is it to yourself or is it to God? That's the simple question a Christian ought to ask. And it goes to men and women both. It would actually be immodest for me to come in here in an Armani suit. It's not just about if somebody's in here with her skirt's too short. Okay? I would be immodest if I came in here in an Armani suit. Okay? Women can be immodest by drawing attention to themselves by what they wear. Obviously, if a woman wore a bikini in here, she would get noticed, right? On the other hand, if I wore a $3,000 three-piece suit in here today, I'd be drawing attention to myself. I would be drawing attention to myself. And that's just as immodest as if a woman come in here in a swimsuit. I went to church as a child where jeans or slacks and a button-down shirt, collared shirt was standard apparel. Maybe you'd have a guy with a tie or a bolo on it or something. And the only other person that ever wore a suit was the pastor. Until one day, another fellow started wearing a suit. And he was noticed. Even as a child, I knew that he was thinking of himself higher than he ought, and he wanted the attention that he thought he ought to get. I was just a wee little fella. I knew that. And I realized even as a child that a suit can be as immodest as a woman showing too much chest or cleavage. In that church, it was clear that women should wear dresses or skirts below the knee and show no chest. In fact, the crabby old ladies being legalistic and unloving about dress code was a bigger issue than immodestly dressed women in that church. So that church was strict on modest apparel. But here's this guy drawing just as much and more attention to himself by wearing a suit. That's immodesty. It failed both tests of immodesty, both portions of immodesty. First, it drew attention to himself, and secondly, it did not show respect to the others, respect that they deserved. What do I mean by that? That guy was putting himself above the other men in the church. The pastor wore a suit, everybody else was just modestly dressed. He wasn't. How do you think that went over with other men in the church? Not so good. He had no compassion. He cared not what it made anybody else feel or their feelings. He didn't care. He only cared about what he felt. And he felt good wearing a suit. And he liked the attention it brought him. Now, maybe in a true sense, maybe he's true in a sense that those other fellows have to deal with their own looks and their own feelings. He could have said, yeah, that's a them problem, you know. You know, they said, you know, you're kind of flashing around your money and your prestige. He said, well, that's a you problem if it bothers you. That's a you problem. And that's what's said. And I guess that's fair to say. You can make that argument. You could say, as a Christian, it is our responsibility, though, to esteem others higher than ourselves. Look at Philippians 2:3, or I'll flip over there and do it. Philippians 2:3. Right after Ephesians, before 1st, 2nd Timothy. Philippians 2:3. You know what it says there? It says, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem other better than themselves. That means you care about other people's feelings. As a Christian, it is your responsibility what other people feel and think and how they are. Because you esteem them above yourself. What does that mean? As Christians, you do have to care about how your actions make other people feel. If I had a really sweet Humvee or something, or I wouldn't want to come and show it off and make all you insignificant non-Humvee owners jealous here at church. I would drive my poor old Suburban. And I keep my Humvee. But some people, nope. They got their nice Humvee. They're going to flaunt it. When I get mine, I don't even want a Humvee. I'm just being obtuse, saying that you guys are being jealous of a military Humvee. But when I get my ultralight airplane, we'll come and buzz it over your houses, I wanted an ultralight, but I've been informed by both my father and my wife that is never going to happen. So, but how would it be if I'm going to rub your nose in my stupid little ultralight? No, I try to at least be modest about that, just not flaunt it in front of people. I've seen pastors wear Hawaiian shirts, and they fit in because they're a pastor in Hawaii. And then I've seen people get up to speak in churches in Hawaiian shirts, and really, you can tell that they just wanted to draw some attention to themselves in a room of just common, they're out of line, and the attitude is, I'm special, look at me. Be cautious in your life if you're doing stuff. I'm special, look at me. If you're being looked at, it ought to be as a mirror reflecting Christ, not absorbing it for your own glory. Someone can say, I dress in a way that is unusual, except for the fact that this is the way I dress all the time, every day of the week. If I were to dress differently, it would bring me more attention than if I just wear what I wear. It's my uniform. How would it be if John the Baptist stopped wearing his camel hair and threw on a toga? So while modesty is a concerted action, it is born of the heart. Why are you doing what you're doing? And it's not just humility, but out of love for other people's consideration for other people's feelings. It's a concerted action not to draw attention to ourselves, which are 100% opposite of what the world is telling you to do, to draw attention to yourself. But it's also out of a love for your brethren. It's a love for them that tries not to discourage or shame them. You know, I don't normally pee in my pants, but if somebody accidentally peed in their pants, I would rather pee in my pants with them than for them to be humiliated alone. I'd esteem their feelings higher than my own. So then it'd be easy for me to dress modestly rather than outdress people who can't afford better clothes. The church in your pajamas and not bathing is not an act of modesty. It's an act of laziness, if you can and have better to do with. And actually it's immodest in that you are drawing attention to yourself on how poor of hygiene you have. I mean, you have a little bit of an obligation to do your best you can before the Lord. Not to draw attention to yourself, both because you're so fancy or because you're so slothful and lazy and stink so much. Having said that, if a homeless stinking fella come in here, he'd be welcome, if that's the best he can do. You know? It is a heart issue. If you're just coming in here rolling out of bed because you're too lazy, that's one issue. But if some person in here, they really are having a heart change, and they come in here high or thinking of the dumpster they just crawled out of, I'd give them a hug and show them Jesus. So then we all come all the way down to the typical notion of what modesty is in church, which, for what most people think of it, is the way women dress. Most people think modesty refers to women dressed, and not just in 1 Timothy 2:9 sense of not being fancy, because Paul told Timothy in 1 Timothy 2:9, it's them not trying to draw attention to themselves out of fanciness. And we don't just leave it at that as an American church. We add to it and say, well, it's not showing too much skin. If you show cleavage in a church, in a church that no one else does, you draw attention to yourself. That's fair to say. By the way, this is another side note. I remember one time when somebody visited this church a long, long time ago. And, I mean, it was quite the low V-neck. And I was greeting them like I should and did. And I remember I had a pimple on my nose. And they were yammering. And I did this. And I looked right down my nose. Well, then the next thing I know, she's doing this. Like I looked at her cleavage. And I think, what? That's a difficult position to put me in. Now you somehow think I'm looking at your boobs and all I was looking at a pimple on my nose. And I think if you're going to be that conceited about it, maybe you shouldn't be wearing that. Because it puts me in a terrible... And she never came back. Because I'm sure she thinks I was looking at her cleavage. No! I was looking at a pimple on my nose. And I just think if you're going to be that touchy about it, maybe you shouldn't be wearing that. And you put me in a bad position. Because I'm sure that's what you've told people, that I looked at your breast when you visited this church. That's out of line. You shouldn't even be putting yourself, let alone me, in that position. That's a real side note. But it amazes me that it can get to that point. But, and it's not just showing too much skin. You can't make these generic rules, then you turn it into legalism. Somebody could come in here in a wetsuit, a bodysuit, skin tight spandex, and they'd be just as immodest. I imagine that would draw attention to them too. Now, why are they doing it? Is it just because they fell out of the sky after scuba diving, or is it because they want the attention? So it's not just a matter of how much skin, it's something more than that. What is it? Well, certainly it's a question of drawing attention to yourself. But what about the second part of modesty? The part where you would forego yourself in order to show others respect. Maybe even respect that they don't deserve. So the principle is stated like this. A young girl might walk in here with her boobs hanging out her top and her butt hanging out her bottom, and we would tell her she is dressed inappropriately, and most pious Christians would tell her she's enticing young men to look at her, possibly to even lust after her. And that woman might say, what you think in your head isn't my problem. They should learn to control their own thoughts. If my breasts arouse them, then that's their problem. They need to control their own thoughts and hormones. And that's a common thing for women to say nowadays. And they would get a standing ovation from their fellow feminists. But here's the thing. If you're a Christian, then what you make others think about is your problem. It is your problem. You have an obligation to build up your brethren, not to tempt them and be a stumbling block to bring them down. Do they deserve that consideration and respect? No, they don't. But you're a Christian, and part of modesty says that you're going to give them what they don't deserve. You're held accountable for leading people into sin. And if you don't trust me, read the chapters around 1 Corinthians. And you start learning about taboo sins and stumbling blocks to your brethren. Paul said, I won't even eat meat if it causes the vegans to get offended. I won't eat the free temple meat if it causes the vegans to be offended. I'm not going to do it. What are you willing to forego in order to build other people up? Are you so arrogant that you're causing your brethren to stumble? Modesty includes the principle that you're going to show respect that is not deserved to others. And yes, that includes women dressing in a way not to entice others to look or lust, either out of fornication or jealousy. By the way, women, the way you dress tells me and others what you think of yourself. Hear me out here. What you portray is usually what you think is most important about yourself. And when a woman has to show off her goods to me or to the world or to everybody else, it says that's what she thinks is the best thing about her. She's going to show what she thinks is the best thing about herself. You can do it with your boobs or your butt, or you can show off your brains or whatever, but it's what you put out there. It's usually what you believe is most important about you. So it seems to me that it'd be good to lead with the fact that you are a God-fearing, Bible-believing, born-again daughter of God. Because that is the best thing about you. And that's what you need and can portray to people. Because there's nothing to be that's better than that. I'll tell you, boobs sag, skin wrinkles, teeth yellow, hair thins, butts dimple, belly stretch, eyes dim, brains wander, muscles soften, cheeks pale, but the light of Christ will never change in a believer's life. And that's what you need to lead with. Whether you're young or old, lead with that. It will not fail you. Men, likewise, little side note, women might entice away physically, but you can entice away with your charm. You better be careful. I tell women here, I tell them you better be careful tempting and enticing men physically with your body. Essentially, that's what I said. I will put that on the women. That's absolutely true. That's their responsibility. Men, you better be careful leading women on. I don't care if you're married, if you're young, if you're a boy, whatever age and whatever situation you're in. You better be very cognizant that you're not tempting women emotionally, romantically. You better be very cautious. You better put your charm and your swagger aside if you're not married to the woman you're dealing with. You say your charm and your swagger for your wife. You must be very careful how charming and studly and heroic you are. Some men, they live to be heroic and to be seen, and they don't save it for their wives. They want everybody to know how manly they are. You better be careful letting the world know how manly you are. You lead and you entice away, and you are emotionally messing with women that you have no right to emotionally mess with. And that's just as advice, because why are you wanting to be seen? Why do you want to be the hero? Why do you want that woman to think that you're a stud? Me problem. You want the attention, it's vanity. So man, you better be careful coveting the attention of some of these women. And you don't get it but bearing your chest, because women aren't any more dad bods or as sexy as bodybuilders. So it's not, women aren't enticed by skin as much as they are enticed by the sense of security or the sense of giving or how manly a man is. And you better be careful coveting the attention of women that you have no right to covet that attention for. Meaning your own spouse, your own mother, and your own children, your own daughters. Outside of that, you better be very careful when you get off and you get a rise out and you feel good about impressing a woman that isn't yours. That means those three categories. So men, that goes for you too. This is not just about that the women need to cover up their cleavage. This means you keep your charisma in your own home. Lastly, and maybe most importantly, high-nosed snobbery is worse than high-cut shorts. Okay? If someone walks in here, especially out of naivete, and you see that maybe their shorts are a little short, or their skirt is a little tight, or their shirt is a little tight, or their skirt is a little high, then you make your opinion known, and you have to know, you need your opinion to be made known at that person, or to other people around you. How dare you? Okay? Especially if it's a young Christian, or not a Christian, or they're naive, or they're still on milk. And yes, you were on me. I remember as a child. So what I would say, can't help but say, the high-nosed snobs looking down their nose at some of these people, judging what they're wearing, knowing, I think to myself, lady, I've been to your house and you wouldn't let me look at your photo albums because you were embarrassed and ashamed of what you wore when you were young. And here you are. I'm not saying that we don't need to deal with a modestly dressed young lady that came. But for you to make it known, your disapproval of it, whispers, or, man, you think that some of these old women were choking to death with noises they make to draw attention to them, which is a form of immodesty. Draw attention to them. I just got a little carried away there. I'm not kidding you. You think some of these women are dying because they want, they try to, hey, is she dying? Is she having a seizure? And I'm not kidding you, because they say they want you to look at what they disapprove of. How dare you? You're more out of line trying to shame someone in their naivete, youthfulness, and their Christianity than they are naively wearing what they would normally wear. It's not overt. Lose your voice, right? Get Ross's attention. I don't know how these snobby old ladies do it. I think it is much more inappropriate to seek to bring attention to someone's attire in negative ways than it is for them to seek attention in inappropriate ways. And what do I mean by that? Let's say a new couple shows up for church and she comes in short shorts. How would it be for the pastor's wife to let out a audible gasp? Or to look around at people with an accentuated, aghast look, appalled look. You better be careful. Because there was probably a time when you showed up looking like that, A. And number two, you're going to be held accountable if you run that young person off from a church that can help them. You better be careful. That's the absolute worst way to handle the situation. In fact, get to 1 Timothy if you're not there already. Back to 1 Timothy. In fact, I think that is why Paul chose this particular time to tell Timothy what he told him about women in church. Okay? And now this is a no-no passage, because this gets all the women stink eye in the pastor when he goes to this passage. But I think you're going to like it a little bit better when I put it into context here. Okay? This is the passage that says, well, you're there. I don't hear pages turning. Maybe a few more. 1 Timothy 2, 1 Tim 2, 9. In like manner also that women adorn themselves in modest apparel, not, with shamefastness. And by the way, that's not shamefacedness, as some people, I don't know why they read that. I guess that's in other places. But here my King James is shamefastness and sobriety, not with broided or braided hair or gold or pearls or costly array, but with good works. Verse 11, let the women learn in silence with all subjection. Whoa. Take the black marker and put that out, because we don't want to hit that point, because that's a no-no point now day and age. Because they don't want to hear that. Women don't want to hear that they need to be modest in church even with their voice. That you don't tell women that today. Far be it for me to preach that, or any other preacher to preach that they have to have. But no, I want to point out the correlation here. 1 Timothy 2:11. Let the women learn in silence with all subjection. I find it very ironic that is immediately after this passage on modest apparel. Not because, the immodest ones are the ones that are going to be running their mouth, but I think there's something to be said. And I think Paul might have known that it'd be the crabby old women that would shame the young, new, sexy dressing women. And Paul is saying women dressing modestly, women dress modestly. Also, he's like looking at the young ladies that are putting it out there with their braided hair and their pretty gold jewelries. He's like, women dress modestly. And then he comes over here to these jealous old women that they have not dressed immodestly in years. They used to, but they haven't in years. He says, now, women, dress modestly. Also, crabby women, shut up. It's not your place to scold these women the way you're wanting to scold them out of emotion and maybe jealousy and spite and scorn. So he says, women, dress modestly. Women, you don't get to be the ones to tell them that. No, we'll let the men, the pastor and the bishops, and if you don't believe me, just look at chapter 3, the bishops and the deacons, that's to say, the pastor and then the men of the church. And we don't elect deacons here, but you know what deacon means? It means servant, okay? And the pastor is just the chief servant, and the deacons are the servants. So if you want to be a deacon in this church, serve the church. That's the way it goes. It's serving. We don't take, it's not a popularity contest. It's most qualified according to God, and the qualification is your home's in order, you're in order, and you serve the church. That's the deacon, okay? And the bishop, he's just the chief servant. The pastor will always be the one who's sacrificing the most in some way or capacity. And if I have failed that, I'm sorry. I hope I do better in the future. I don't know. God's going to keep score. But I hope at least I'm in the running for it. But anyways, that's what it is. It is, women, you need to watch how you dress. Whoa, 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 Bertha. You don't get to be the one to look down your nose and tell her about it. That's what that means. Does that not shine a whole new light on that verse? Women learn in silence. We all know women. They're more emotional. That's a good thing. I'm not saying women are more emotional. That's bad. Women are just more emotional. Sometimes it leads to cattiness. I have seen in churches. I have seen two women who just say, I don't know what's some very, very generic names off the top of my head, but we'll just say Bertha and Bessie. I've seen Bertha and Bessie 1 week, cattiness, and then 3 weeks later, they're just like best friends. I don't know how that works. It's just a woman thing. And I don't know why that's funny. That's just reality. But it's just, that's what Paul's saying. Listen, you guys need to stop putting your hair up and showing off your youth and your good-lookingness. And you need to humble yourself down. You need some modesty. And it's like, whoa, Bertha, whoa, Bessie, I'm dealing with this. You guys be quiet. This is not your place to correct these. If Peter said, now you old women can guide these, but it's at Peter's discretion. It's not just you get to go over and start checking up everybody you want to check up free-heartedly. Because Paul said women need to show the modesty in the church and they need to be quiet. There's a need for patience and love and leading of the God by the Holy Spirit, even through a deacon or a bishop, pastor, to deal with certain situations. And you better be very careful of the arrogance you show in certain situations. Paul is not telling them that to be mean. He's telling them that more like, you better be very careful. Because if you run that young lady off, your soul is on the line, type of a deal, okay? Your eternity is on the line. Maybe not in there, actually getting to heaven, but there will be repercussions. So maybe you better just be quiet, because this is a serious issue. Somebody suggested I preach on milk and meat, and maybe we should, because there's a very, very big difference between the world and non-Christians, mature meat-eating Christians, and the milk-eating, drinking Christians. And you better be careful when you're dealing with milk, that you don't cause these little children to stumble. I put here, and I'll close. I've had people act aghast at a modest apparel, and then the next day they're at the beach surrounded by people in bathing suits. And I just think to myself, better be careful with what you're, and legalism is as terrible as worldlyism, and we can't trade one for the other. Let's pray. Precious Heavenly Father, I hope that what was said was correct and glorifying to you, and that somehow it will sharpen us and even prepare us as a church or as people for whatever might come in our lives, that we would conduct ourselves in a way that would be befitting to you. In Jesus' name, amen. 401.